Hey, good evening, class. Let's have a little intro to Buddhism. So, Buddhism is a universal, non-theistic tradition that began with a charismatic leader. What should these three characteristics mean to you as we develop our knowledge regarding how to compare world religions? So, universal. To be universal means that you're going to tell other people about it. There is an imperative to tell others because everyone can participate, and it is believed that human suffering would be alleviated if this path were followed. So universal religions, therefore, spread widely, powered by the traveling monks or nuns or missionaries or whoever who want to bring its message to the world as part of their discipline. It is non-theistic. It does not describe a transcendent divinity. Rather, the things that will provide salvation for humans are the concepts of emptiness, anatman, and the marga, or the path of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So by marga or path, right? So we're talking about that spiritual discipline of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Charismatic leader. In this case, Gautama, who becomes the Buddha. But there are no claims to divinity for this charismatic leader, no claims to being a prophet for a transcendent figure. Rather, he proclaimed the capacity for all humans to attain Buddhahood, to attain enlightenment. So when you combine these three characteristics, what do you get? As the book puts it, from the outset, Buddhism has been a religion that, quote, proposes to teach a new worldview, end quote, page 357. But without Brahman or any other divine originator, it emphasizes a human path or marga. And we remember that term from Hinduism because they're both originating in Sanskrit. So there is no deity guiding you on the path in this case. There is no Atman who is going to be Brahman, if you just realize that. Rather, the middle way, this path, is undertaken by an individual. So, is it a religion? What do we do with the two words that most people associate with religion, divine and sacred, with regard to Buddhism? Divine is an awkward word for Buddhism, as is the word sacred, and our authors offer the following: that in the case of Buddhism, sacred means absolute truth, and that divine means one who has realized absolute truth. Now, because it is experienced as bliss and a release from suffering, enlightenment is fully grounded in the material world, while nevertheless being distinct in its salvation from the sufferings of the human condition. So this is quite interesting, actually, right? If the sacred is not being some kind of a holy thing that imbues an essence in something, but rather absolute truth is defined as sacred. And then the divine becomes one who has realized absolute truth. This is distinctive, yes, compared to our others. But it also, if part of our goal is to understand how Buddhism makes sense to Buddhists, these are answers to the question of that which is of ultimate significance, right? We're not just talking about the truth of the soccer game. We are talking about absolute truth. We have created a rarefied issue of ultimacy here. We have moved into a realm of practice that is not directed towards the life that would perpetuate suffering. There is alleviation, there is salvation here. All right, so while there is no God who guides you on the path, the Buddha felt that the power of absolute truth of reality has the power to guide you. So the truth will guide you. he would say, don't believe what I'm saying, try the path and see if it works, right? Will you find truths in here? And if so, I'd say keep going because it's pretty good stuff. So absolute truth could guide you if you were capable of realizing it, but there was no divine purpose steering you to bliss. From a comparative perspective, what can be helpful to understand is that it's very tricky to discuss something like truth and have it refer to anything tangible. Absolute truth, which should be even more tangible than truth because it's absolute, is nevertheless even more intangible, an object of contemplation more than it is something that you could put on a truthometer to weigh it, right? So here in the language, to go from truth to absolute truth makes it ultimately, right, it's more truth. It's pretty truthy, but it's not absolute truth, you might say, right? Let's put something on the truthometer. Pretty truthy, not absolute truth. I can hear Stephen Colbert's objection that truthiness is as truthiness asserts that it does. But that's getting away from the point. Or is it? A Buddhist haiku illustrates this point. A haiku about a frog splashing into a pond, for instance, is an effort to make the intangible idea of the absolute truth of impermanence become imaginable through a metaphoric image of a lowly creature doing everyday things in the ecological web of life. This is, right? How do you get to something like absolute truth? Go to a frog in a pond. That, in a nutshell, provides very interesting snapshot of the unique contours of Buddhism, but it only gets more interesting the more you look. So who was Buddha? Born into a ruling clan, the Shakya clan, we refer to this man as Gautama when we think of him as a young prince. But after his enlightenment, we refer to him as Shakyamuni Buddha, the Bud, meaning to awaken. Gautama lived 563 to 488 BCE in India. So if you refer back to the Hinduism timeline, you will see that he was living at the time that the Brahmanas, the Brahmanic interpretation of the Vedas, were established. And the later Vedas, the Upanishads, were being written. Okay, that's his milieu. He was born, therefore, into a time where the hierarchical superiority of the priestly class was being firmly established in the textual traditions of Hinduism. However, the Upanishads, which are also called Vedanta, the end of the Vedas, challenged the ideas of a priestly ritual and promoted instead internal reflection as the path to moksha. So Gautama was trained, went through the rituals for a young prince, the samskaras, to become a householder, husband, and father. He was in a very rich textual world of competing ideas that ultimately, with the Vedantas, was tipping toward the power of meditation rather than the power of Vedic sacrificial rituals. So amidst this rich world of Dharma, therefore, Gautama was a guy whose parents protected him from the brutal realities of life outside the palace. But nevertheless, he developed a problem. I understand that issue. If only I simply liked them all. Anyway, he developed a problem and began to reject his princely status. Oh, I haven't got one of those. When he was awakened to the problems of human suffering, when he saw 3 kinds of human suffering, after he finally convinced his father to let him out of the palace grounds. So he saw crippling sickness, aging, and death. 3 things he hadn't known till that walk. The 4th thing he saw was a sadhu, a Hindu ascetic, who was pursuing the path to attain moksha of a severe, disciplined life. That's what Flesher described as the life is bad path, but which we came to understand is not simply that life is bad, negative, but rather the single-minded pursuit of realization was so good one should release all attachments in order to focus on that path. So this is our guy, and this is our tradition, universal, non-theistic tradition that began with a charismatic leader. Who knew? Thanks for listening.